If we look at the history of the paranormal, we're really looking at a history of media literacy, or lack thereof. In the Victorian era, the evidence for the afterlife was biological. It was analog. You had a medium's body, the tipping table, the floating trumpet. But when photography arrived, we got spirit photography via double negative. Double exposures. Really. When magnetic tape arrived, we got EVPs. But the 21st century has undergone a digital transformation. The modern ghost hunter is no longer a mystic. They're a technician. They're burdened with flight cases of specialized electronics, and this has fundamentally altered the epistemology, the theory of the knowledge of the paranormal. Evidence is no longer a subjective feeling of a chill in the air. It's now framed as objective data. We look at a K2 meter spiking to 20 milligauss, or a stick figure on a tablet, and we say the machine doesn't lie. But this objectivity is illusory. We're dealing with the black box effect. You, as the user, understand the input. You point the camera. You understand the output. You see a ghost. But the intermediate process, the sensor fusion, the noise reduction, the predictive algorithms remain opaque. When a 19th century spirit photograph was blurry, a skeptic could explain it via chemistry of the developing plate. Today, explaining why a stick figure appeared in an empty chair requires an understanding of infrared structured light projection, depth map calculations, and machine learning classification thresholds. The barrier to debunking has risen alongside the complexity of the technology. This creates a knowledge gap that paranormal narratives exploit to the T. The complexity of the tool lends authority to the anomaly. We're witnessing a form of scientism, the aesthetic adoption of scientific symbols without the scientific method. We set up tripods, we read meters and record data, but the logic is circular. If the meter spikes, it is a ghost. If it doesn't, the ghost is just quiet. This is not falsifiable. It's a ritual that uses language of engineering to validate a belief system. And the tools themselves, they're often sold as broken by design. Full spectrum cameras are just cameras with the noise filters removed. The Ghost Hunter's Toolkit is a collection of broken sensors tuned to maximize false positives. The glitch is the product. Let's start with the most pervasive tool in the field, the SLS camera. You've seen this on every major ghost hunting show. A tablet displays a video feed and suddenly a stick figure maps onto a doorway or an empty chair. The investigator screams, "There's a figure standing there!" In nearly every instance, this device is a Microsoft Kinect sensor, usually the V1 model from the Xbox 360. It's mounted to a handle. To understand the error, we have to understand light coding. The sensor contains an infrared projector that emits a structured light pattern, a constellation of thousands of IR dots. It then uses an IR camera to read the reflection of those dots. By measuring the lateral shift or disparity of the dots, it calculates distance via triangulation. This creates a depth map, which is a grayscale video where brightness equals distance. But the depth map doesn't contain stick figures. That requires a second layer, the skeletal tracking algorithm. This is where the ghost lives. Microsoft trained a random forest classifier on millions of synthetic depth images of human bodies. The goal was to allow the Xbox to recognize a player instantly so that they could play Dance Central. But here is the critical flaw: algorithmic bias. The classifier was trained to find human beings. It was not trained to recognize not human beings. It has no category for antique chair, coat rack, or tripod. It has two states: human and noise. When you point this camera at a cluttered haunted house, The structured light falls on complex shapes. A high-backed chair with a coat draped over it presents a depth profile that statistically resembles a head and shoulders. Remember, Xbox wanted this to be available to everyone, so they had to account for variations in whether or not somebody had an arm or not. The algorithm has a completion compulsion. It cannot track just a head. It needs a relatively full skeleton to function as a game controller. So once it falsely identifies the chair back as a torso, it must find legs. It searches the noise below the chair, the shadows, the carpet, the texture, the table legs, and force fits the joint data onto whatever is there. And why does the ghost dance? Why does it look energetic? It's because the sensor is noisy. The IR dots shimmer due to electronic fluctuation. In one frame, the chair looks 51% like a person, and in the next, the noise shifts, and it looks 49% like a person. The stick figure flickers in and out. If the noise causes the leg joint to jump from a shadow to a tripod leg, the figure appears to kick. And it's not a manifestation, it's a math error oscillating at 30 frames per second. As the Kinect became obsolete, the industry moved on to mobile apps. We now see the rise of LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. On the iPhone 12 Pro, the iPad Pro, apps like GhostTube LiDAR generate 3D wireframe meshes of the rooms in real time. This uses time-of-flight technology. The phone emits pulses of infrared light and measures precise nanoseconds it takes for them to bounce back. It builds a point cloud, but to turn that cloud into a stable room, it uses SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. The phone has to track its own position in space while mapping the walls. SLAM relies on feature points, high contrast corners or textures to orient itself. But the ghost hunts happen in the dark, in low texture hallways, and this causes drift. As the user moves the phone, the internal gyroscope might say we moved 10 inches, but the visual data says we moved 0 inches. The software panics, and it paints the room in geometry that's in the wrong place. The result? A duplicated section of the wall appears floating in the middle of the room. To the investigator, this looks like a jagged floating mesh, and it looks like an entity or a mass manifesting in the air. It's actually just a detached piece of the room that the phone forgot where to place. It gets worse with mirrors, because you see LiDAR is light. It reflects off glass. The software, however, assumes that all light travels in a straight line. When you scan a mirror, the LiDAR measures the distance to the objects reflected in the mirror. It creates a 3D mesh of a phantom room, extending beyond the mirror. Users see this and claim that they found a portal or an interdimensional doorway. It's simply just the physics of reflections. We also see green figures appearing in these scans. This is Apple's ARKit body tracking API. Like the Kinect, it's tuned for sensitivity. In a noisy point cloud, say a column of dust or smoke, the stabilization logic tries to lock onto a shape to prevent the AR character from flickering. The intelligent movement of the figure is often just a smoothing algorithm interpolating between two noisy states. And now we have to talk about the orb, the cockroach of paranormal evidence. It's ubiquitous. It's in every photo. It appears as a translucent, circular, glowing anomaly. This is technically known as backscatter, or near-camera reflection in the CCTV field. It requires 3 things: a particle, like dust, pollen, or a bug, a light source close to the lens, like a flash, and the particle being in the zone of confusion. Real term, look it up, CCTV analysis. The real term, look it up. The zone of confusion is the area immediately in front of the lens, usually like 1 to 3 inches away. That's where objects cannot be in focus. Because the flash and the lens are nearly coaxial on a smartphone, the light hits the dust particle and reflects back directly into the lens. Because it's out of focus, a point of light renders as a disk. And this is the circle of confusion. People often claim that they see faces or structures inside the orb. But this is usually a diffraction pattern caused by the uneven surface of a dust particle magnified by the defocus. It's not a face. It is a microscopic landscape of a piece of lint. In video, we see this with infrared night vision. Security cameras illuminate the room with a ring of IR LEDs. This creates a flashlight effect, invisible to the eye, but bright to the sensor. A dust particle drifting close to the camera gets blasted with this light and glows white. When we see rods or skyfish, those long worm-like energy ribbons, we're seeing an insect moving faster than the shutter speed. In low light, a camera might drop to 1/30th of a second exposure. A moth flies past. The camera captures the entire path during that fraction of a second, creating a motion-blurred streak. It's not an interdimensional creature. It's not an angel. It's a bug with motion blur. Let's move to the audio-visual partner, the environmental sensor. Specifically, the K2 EMF meter. It has 5 LEDs. Green is safe, red is a ghost. Originally, this was designed to find dangerous wiring faults. And now, it's a binary communication device. To understand why this fails, we have to look at the frequency domain. The K2 is designed to detect ELF, extremely low frequency, in the 50 to 60 hertz range. However, the device is not perfectly shielded against RF, which is radio frequency, which is in the millihertz to gigahertz range. Most of the common sources of false positives are the smartphone in your pocket. Even when idle, your phone performs polling or handshaking with the nearest cell phone tower. It sends out a high-energy RF burst to say, "I am here." This burst induces currents in the K2's unshielded circuitry. The meter spikes to red. You ask, is there a spirit here? The phone polls the tower. The meter lights up. And you think that you're actually talking to a ghost, but you're actually talking to a cellular handshake. There's also the issue of switching mode power supplies, or SMPS. Modern electronics, LED drivers, cell phone chargers, they don't draw power smoothly. They switch on and off thousands of times a second. This creates dirty electricity, high-frequency noise that radiates from the wiring in the walls. In the old house with knob and tube wiring, the whole room becomes an antenna. If you walk into a standing wave of this interference, the meter spikes. You call it a cold spot or a manifestation, but it's actually just electromagnetic interference. We can't ignore the auditory side as well. The fucking spirit box. This is a radio that scans frequencies rapidly. The PSB7 model, for example, often sweeps at roughly 100 milliseconds per step. Why 100 milliseconds? Because that's roughly the length of a human phenome, or syllable. By sweeping the broadcast radio, the device grabs 1/10 of a second of a DJ, a commercial, or just static. It outputs a stream of disjointed phenomes. It generates a Rorschach test for the ears, essentially. This triggers auditory pareidolia. But the real trick is priming. If I put you in the Estes method, blindfolded, noise-canceling headphones, I am depriving your senses. Your brain is desperate for pattern. If I ask, "What's your name?" I prime you to listen for a name. You will stitch the da and vid together and make David. If you see a subtitle on YouTube videos that says, "Help me," You will hear "help me" in the white noise. And finally, we have the newest frontier, artificial intelligence. We're seeing tools like Rimini and Topaz used to enhance evidence. But these use generative adversarial networks, or GANs. A GAN does not fucking find hidden detail. It hallucinates a detail based on training data. If you feed it a grainy photo of a window full of ISO noise and that noise vaguely resembles a face, the AI will replace the noise with a photorealistic eye from its database. The ghost is a mathematical average of thousands of faces. Why do we fall for this? Why is this endless renewable fuel for content? Because of our evolutionary psychology, humans possess a hyperactive agency detection device, or HAD. In the wild, it was safer to assume a rustling bush was a tiger, an agent, than the wind. We are hardwired to detect intention in ambiguous data. The spirit box, the Kinect stick figure, the LiDAR blob, these are all high-fidelity stimuli for our HAD, or HADD, if you will. The complexity of the technology reinforces the bias. We think the machine is advanced, therefore it must be right. But these tools, while they fail to detect the paranormal, are actually powerful pedagogical instruments. We can use them to teach forensic literacy. We can use orbs to teach optics. We can use the K2 to teach electromagnetism. And we can use the SLS to teach machine learning bias. By deconstructing the ghost, we can reconstruct an understanding of the machinery. The study technomysticism is ultimately a study on how humans interact with the unknown black boxes we carry in our pockets every day. And now, finally, I'll teach you one more thing before I go. How to abruptly end a video.
We cracked the code, we broke the spell. Another myth debunked so well. Till next time, don't be deceived. Stay sharp, stay smart. Believe in what's believed. Truth wins out every time. Truth wins out every time.